So many times, you and I have seen God use people from surprising circumstances and hardship to do extraordinary things. What Scripture says is above anything we could ask or think. My guest tonight is the mayor of a town in southwestern Pennsylvania that's had moments of greatness, but like many cities in the Rust Belt, has suffered from years of economic hardship and decline. Tonight, we'll learn how one mom worked and prayed for her son to rise above their meager circumstances. We'll see how he was seemingly protected at every step of the journey to become the young, improbable leader of a city's comeback. Don't miss this conversation. Stay with us. In November 2019, Frye was the political headline of the day, a young conservative Republican running and winning in a Democratic working-class stronghold of Newcastle, Pennsylvania. But it was his life before politics that more than anything seemed to explain the focus and drive of this young up-and-coming leader. You see, Chris's mom was, for much of Chris's early life, a single parent, leading 4 children through the valley of poverty. It was her Christian faith that radiated to her kids and kept them on the narrow path. Chris would go on to earn a master's degree from Pitt and spend much of his 20s working in some of the most challenging and economically distressed neighborhoods in Pittsburgh. His success as mayor even led many political observers to cheer on a recent race for statewide office. He fell short, but left a big impression as he traveled the state. Chris, welcome to State of Independence.
Joe, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today.
It's great to have you on and to see you in the flesh, and not just on the screen or to read about you. You just had a race for a statewide office.
Yes. We just finished the race for lieutenant governor. It went very well, met a lot of great people, and it was one of those opportunities to jump out in faith and see where God led myself and my community.
Did you get to all 67 counties, or most of them, or many
of them?
Most of them.
Many of them. There's a lot of places.
There's a lot of places.
Right?
Big
yeah.
state.
Big state.
Yeah. So tell us about your upbringing. You know, it seems that your mother has had a significant impact on your life. Your mother happens to be a Christian woman who prayed for you. But tell us about what your life was like growing up. How many kids in your family, all that?
I have 3 sisters, so there was 4 of us. My mother was a teen mom. She made a rebellious decision at the age of 14 and 15 to, get married and have kids. And she raised 4 children. She had my 2 older sisters. I was a 3rd child, and I have a younger sister, Lauren. My mother, we lived in poverty. It was a poverty-stricken.
What town did you live in?
I was born in Richmond, Virginia. Mm-hmm. So that's where my mother and father were. And he left early. I was just a young. I don't even remember. Of the story she tells me. He made a mistake at a job he was at. He left her with 3 kids. Me in her arms and my younger sister still in the womb. So It was early on when he walked out of her life and our life, and from that point on, it was just her and my grandmother to start out, and then we were raised in the church. Grandmother had a small church. We joke all the time that it was our church because as kids we were the worship leaders. We did the communion. We took the offering. We opened the doors. We did the children's service. So it was a very close-knit family, and my grandmother was a stronghold up until she passed away when I was at the age of 6.
Wow, you were only 6 years old when your grandmother.
I'm sorry, 7. I was 7. I got
7.
Yeah. Yep.
That's still very young.
Yep.
And your mother was how old at this time? How old was your mother?
My mother. She would have been in her early 30s, yeah. Wow. Early 30s.
Wow. That's really something. So your mother was a teenage mother.
Yes.
And her husband left her alone to fend for herself and for her 4 children.
Yes.
And your mother worked, I'm guessing?
She worked a lot of jobs. Oftentimes she had 3 jobs. She spent a lot of time, she went to school. There was times I remember we were in her college classes, and myself and my younger sister sitting on the floor playing with our toys while she was in school. Sometimes in the office at her jobs where she worked at, she never gave up. and she never.
She put herself through college, you're saying?
She put herself through college. Now, she started early. It took her a long time to finish her degree. Later in life, it's funny, we were in college together. She was at Slippery Rock University while I was at Gannon University.
Yeah.
So she never got her accomplish her degree early because of the circumstances we were in. Very transient, moving and switching states.
How many places did you live?
Oh man, I can't even count them. There were so many. When we lived in Richmond, Virginia, we have names for every place that we lived, just different circumstances. And then we moved to Sterling, Virginia when my grandmother passed away. And then we finally settled for the last 22 years in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. So early on, from birth to about 10 years old, it was just nonstop. We would bounce, there would be shootings in one neighborhood, we go live on the other side of town. Or she had a friend that if there was a mouse in the house and she couldn't take it, we'd go live at another place. It was just tough circumstances. And until we found our homestead in Newcastle, it was just constant moving. Yeah.
How does a young guy like you get to college? I mean, the odds are overwhelming, overwhelmingly against you, especially if you don't have college-educated parents and you don't have income, the means to go. I mean, how does a single mother get her son to go to college? How did that happen?
She says it every day, Jesus Christ. A lot of prayer and a lot of guidance from, her, my grandfather, who wasn't around a lot, but he did raise her in her early age, in her adolescence, to that education was the key. Education was the key to get out of her situation. So while my mom didn't have a degree and she was an 8th grade dropout, she was very intelligent. She had multiple jobs, some very good jobs at certain times, but our circumstances and having 4 kids didn't allow her to make those her career. But it was just what she taught. Every day was education, was hard work, was, serving the Lord and serving the people where, we really, there was times we didn't have food on the table. Again, we lived in rough neighborhoods where, neighborhood drugs were being dealt and gunshots. And there was never a time where she made us feel like we were, from that environment.
Right. You were the only boy in the family.
Only boy.
How did you avoid getting into trouble? I mean, the usual story becomes kid from a single-parent household, not a lot of money, in living in a rough neighborhood, and then the kid doesn't finish high school and goes to jail.
Yeah.
That's the usual story for too many kids who come from those kind of circumstances. How does it that Chris Frye, raised in this difficult, challenging environment, but with a praying mother, gets to college,
right,
and graduate school?
Absolutely, yeah. My mom, again, I took on a responsibility as a young kid. I had every chance to make a wrong decision, just like many young guys or young men in poverty and that live in those circumstances have.
Did somebody try to recruit you to a gang, or?
I've had trying to be recruited to a gang, trying to sell drugs, try everything to really get out of, change my situation. But it's the choices, and it wasn't fear. It was just the fact that the way we were raised. Again, being in church, and my mother just constantly keeping us active. It was either we go to church or we do our sports or we stay or we go to school. That's just how she raised us. Again, it was. Some would see it as dysfunctional, but it was functional in the way that we lived. We were able to overcome certain barriers because we were always striving for more, and it was more or less striving to serve. I think that's the key. It was serving others more than ourselves, even though we were the ones that needed food. We were the ones that needed our lights turned back on, or it was always about doing for others. And that's where, the key in serving the Lord. My grandmother, it was Matthew 6:33, seek ye first the kingdom of God and all his righteousness, and all things will be added unto you. And that's where our life was every single day. So when those circumstances did come, whether, and those decisions had to be made, we always turned back to, what God would do.
Wow. Did you play sports?
I did.
What did you play?
Basketball, football, and track.
Wow. And did you play in high school?
I played in junior high. I didn't play early on in life, but I had a growth spurt. As you can see, I was 8th grade. I got big. I got fast. Was strong, and I played football, so I was a running back, and in our hometown, now Newcastle, it's a big football town back then, now it's big basketball. And I played, and I was really good, and I was on track. I was the kid who dreamt of being in the NFL, and had opportunities with Penn State and other places, and then I had a very, very bad back injury that derailed that dream, and ended up going through, again, depression and hopelessness, and just lost at the age of 15.
Wow.
And I found myself, paralyzed from the waist down, having to get rushed into surgery, and spent some time in Shady Side Rehabilitation Center after having the surgery. And these are little glimmers of how God works. I was distraught.
Well, who wouldn't be? I mean, you're paralyzed from the waist down. It could have been permanent, right?
Could have been permanent. I would never play football again. I would never walk again. All those things that you hear from being in the hospital. And again, the faith is so strong, and you look back, you're like, God is so great. My mother had no means of transport. Newcastle's about an hour north of Pittsburgh. So I remember we were driving it had to be like a 1980 Astro van.
Wow.
Had no seats in the back. My mom had to work, so it was hard for her to get down there. There was times she couldn't even get down after surgery or while I was in the recovery. But again, we didn't pay attention to any of that. We paid attention to where God was leading us in, and I was in a hospital where there was kids with lifelong disabilities that would never be able to do anything ever again. And I remember a young lady that was across the hall from me, from my recovery room, who had a rare blood disease, and she had family and friends coming from Erie, flooding her room, pictures everywhere. She was same situation I was in. One day being active, one day not doing anything. And she was on her deathbed. And I just remember, finding the strength and again, going back to always serving and praying for that young girl. And fast forward to being at Gandy University, I met her dad. And it was a moment, tearful moment, and to find out that girl recovered. She was in Allegheny College, and all she had is a disability to her arm.
Wow.
And I think that's what really got us. That's really what got us through, was never thinking about our situation, but how can we truly serve others, no matter what situation we were in. And that's just one example of it. That was a tough time in my life.
How'd you get to college? How'd you get to the university?
I was graduated Kennedy Catholic, so I went to private school.
You got a scholarship there?
No, no, I was not. I wasn't a good student. I graduated probably 74th out of 76 in my class. Completely bombed my SATs. Just wasn't real motivated after going through all that. By the grace of God, honestly. Gandy University gave me a chance. I had to take placement classes to get in, but came out very successful. Got in and made a lot of bad decisions early on too. I didn't have the guidance. There was no male in my life that had gone to college and completed it, had moved away from their household. I applied to 2 colleges. It was Gandy University in Youngstown, and I got into Gannon, and upon receiving the acceptance to the school, I was unmotivated. I was a youth. I was 17, 18 years old, not sure where I was gonna go. I was hoping for the NFL to play ball and things like that all through my high school, all through high school, and still it lingered on from 15 to 17 to 18, that depression and that self-doubt. And got into Gannon and had a rough first year. My first year was really rough. I almost flunked out where I couldn't go back. And I remember sitting on my mom's couch when I came home, and she said, "What are you gonna do?" And I looked at her and I said, "Mom, we're not gonna continue to live this way. We're not gonna continue to be in poverty. Somebody's got to change the trajectory of our life, right? Living in poverty. Somebody's got to be here and prepared for, the next generation." And I decided to go back my sophomore year. I decided to get more involved, with the Christian ministry at the school. So I went on service trips, all, New York City and things like that. And then, became a resident assistant, so I took on more responsibility. And that's kind of where my life has always been. It's always been about responsibility.
So here you are, freshman year, you're nearly flunking out,
Yep.
and then you come back, and now you're a resident assistant, and you're more focused.
Way more focused. And that was the word. Focus was the word. I wrote out focus on a piece of paper, stuck it to my wall, and every day was able to look at that word and stay focused on the goals that I had set for my life. And it was all guided by my mother. Yeah.
So you graduate from Gannon University, and what happens then?
Just had to make a decision on whether I could stay in school. I knew I needed to take another step and to get a job. So I immediately applied to graduate school. I went to University of Pittsburgh.
Great school.
So I decided just don't wait. Don't hesitate. That's my personality. Just go. Make a decision, you go for it. So with the help of my mom and Pastor Paris Baker, who was my professor at Gannon University, decided to just go straight into grad school, and was successful. And that was an accelerated program at University of Pittsburgh, and achieved that degree in 2 years.
Wow, that's amazing! What a great story.
Thank you.
So you feel motivated. You're a Christian guy. You feel motivated now to be about serving other people, and you've got your undergraduate degree, and you're armed now with a master's degree from Pitt. And where do you go from there?
Just continue to follow the Lord. I was working in Pittsburgh, and living in Pittsburgh at the time of my while I was in school. From there, we just continue to pray. Where do you want me to be? Where do you want me to be? Circumstances while I was down there, as a 20-something years old, you want to live in the city. Yeah. You want to stay there. Your life is this. You want to be a certain way, but that pulling on servanthood pulled me, got an opportunity to come back to the city of Newcastle, got a job offer, and I began to work in my field, social work, the neighborhood development, where I was running an education program at the age of 23, helping students achieve, their education goals, young kids, and high school kids, doing housing rehab in a neighborhood that I grew up in Newcastle, and that had a lot of blight.
Were your friends surprised to see you? People that went to high school with you, that maybe knew the less motivated Chris Frye, surprised to see this Chris Frye with a master's degree?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very, very. But it was always at heart, it was always the one to show love and support to everybody. So it wasn't uncommon. It was just like, wow, Chris, we're actually doing it, So a lot of my friends, they understood where I was at, just unmotivated, just in the sense of not seeing the real course of life that I was supposed to go down. Some folks have doctors, lawyers, and business people in their family. We have pastors and social workers, and mostly that we were around. So not really understanding or knowing which direction to go. But I was happy because social work, my mom, she was magna cum laude graduate of Slip Rock University before I did. So I was like, Mom, hold on, you're making me look bad here, relax. Right. But no, service was so much in our family, and that those values in social work, dignity and worth of a person, service to others, that's what really, attracted us to that field. Yeah. And it was so broad that it allowed me to take on other things. I'm very ambitious, and also, I owned a duplex right out of college, so I got into, real estate. Always looking for other business opportunities and things of that nature. But what I did right out of grad school was to go back to my hometown and to work. And then over a course of about 10 years, I guess built up enough of a reputation looking at, solving the needs in our community, to where I launched out and ran for mayor. Wow.
When we return, I'll ask Mayor Chris Frye about his family, his faith, and what's next for him. Imagine that.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org.
Well, you've heard his fantastic story. His name is Mayor Chris Frye of Newcastle, Pennsylvania. He drove the length of the state last night to be here, and we're so grateful he did. Chris, how do you get to be mayor? I'm sure, and a Republican, so you have a value base. The majority of people of color are Democrats, and you made, I'm guessing, a decision that you would be a Republican?
Yes.
How'd that happen?
It was a decision based off values. Again, growing up in poverty, we used all the services. We were recipients of the welfare programs, from food stamps to housing to education, everything, all the way through life. And never really paying attention to, the polarizing, left and right and what on a national scale, but just what our circumstances led us to utilize those services. And when I decided to run, it was based on the values after looking at both parties. And I looked at, again, very, very closely studied both of them to make a decision to say, I knew the way I was raised. My mother, although our circumstances, was never dependent on the government, never dependent on those systems. While they were there for our time being, that wasn't where our life was going to remain. So also the Christian values, faith, or the love for Christ, the love for just that virtue and understanding how virtue and freedom connect. That was, very important to me as well. So I decided to run, and I ran on the Republican ticket. I've been very transparent about, the decision is to switch over and remain as a Republican, and in the city of Newcastle. And it was, 3-1 Democrat to Republican.
Wow.
So I knew right off the bat that I was at a disadvantage. And I was okay with that. It was just more or less about winning the trust of the people and doing the job, because the history of Newcastle was just so, the perception of Newcastle, where it was a corrupt town, a town that a lot of people didn't believe in. There was nepotism. All these things weighed heavy on our community, and it was time to, what I believe, to bring a new way of doing things. And my goal was just to address the problems as they were, and to lead us to just greener pastures, lead us to a better day in our city.
It's amazing how God can use people, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, God is able to use people who nobody else would expect or suspect would be successful.
Yes.
And he takes Chris Frye, a kid from a poor family, single mother, struggling family, and who wasn't so motivated in his high school years, and who to come back with his master's degree from Pitt and to love people and to serve people and to lead his community going forward, which is a blessing. How old were you when you were elected in 2019?
I was 29.
29 years old.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awful young.
Yes.
That's awful young. And so people would wonder to themselves, what does the future hold for somebody like Chris Frye? I mean, you're so bright and so talented, and you have love in your heart for people, and you have an understanding of what it's like for people who are struggling as well as people who aren't. Which gives you an advantage in a sense, because there are people that run for office that don't know what it's like for people who suffer. You know what it's like to suffer. So that gives you, what do you think the future holds?
Honestly, I just wait on the Lord, follow the Holy Spirit. There's a lot of question marks right now into what's next. We did just run for lieutenant governor. Similar situation as running for mayor, not having a lot of resources, having to gain a lot of support statewide. But, my mother, she'd want me to be the president.
Yeah.
And that's the motive, that's what she always instilled and always talked and spoke into our lives. Be the president, be a business owner, always speaking positive things and great success into our lives. So again, just following the Lord, wherever God has me, just, again, the reason to drive, 7 hours to come here and speak is because, if we can continue to allow the Holy Spirit to work through us and share this message and give hope to others, that's what we're going to do. So, I guess sky's is the limit. The sky's the limit.
Here am I, Lord, send me.
Yep.
Yeah,
so use me, Lord, wherever you have me go. I'm going to continue to raise my family. I have 3 kids and my wife, and just ask the Lord to put me in a position where I can best serve Him.
Outstanding, outstanding. Thanks to the Newcastle Mayor, Chris Frye, for making the trip to Philadelphia. We're so grateful for the sacrifices he's making to love and serve his neighbors. We'll be right back with closing thoughts with our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
Learn more about Joe Watkins and the mission of this program at joewatkins.net. And tell Joe what you thought about today's program in the comment box.
And now let's talk to our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
Well, I think we heard about the power of encouragement.
Yeah. You guys were in the same race for
we
lieutenant
were.
governor. So
Yeah.
how unusual is that
Yeah.
two candidates running for the same office would become friends?
Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, I was thinking about one event where we actually, we were the only candidates there. So we had the whole floor, and we almost introduced each other. But, you know, when you are doing what Chris talked about, which was trusting God for the next step, that really frees you to have friendships without a calculus about if we're kind to each other or if we're normal or act decent, that somehow we're going to give somebody an advantage. And then you can also be, when it's appropriate, unified and talking about some of the same issues, and you almost amplify your message that way. So it was a great experience getting to know Chris, and I met his mom along the way, and just knowing that God sometimes calls people to run a race, political or otherwise, or just a race in life, that doesn't have a clear or definitive outcome, but you do it just because he asks you to do it. And then along the way, you have dozens, sometimes hundreds, in our cases, thousands of encounters with people that maybe just whispering a word of encouragement to them will help them in their own lives.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing what an opportunity. Winning may not be what we as people think winning is, which is, like, oh, well, you won the primary and now you're heading to the general election. But winning may be the people you touched for Christ, the lives that may have been changed because of your interaction with them, even your brief interaction with them. So God is even able to use you on the campaign trail. Yeah,
and it goes both ways too. It's not just the candidates out there, it's the people that God positions along the way who whisper you to just go one more mile, do one more day, and then trust him for the outcome.
Yeah, what a blessing.
Yeah.
What a blessing. Well, that's all the time we have for today's State of Independence. Thanks to our guest, Mayor Chris Frye. What a marvelous story. Take a minute at the end of this show to drop me a line, if you can, in the comment box at joewatkins.org. Your comments help me and also our great production team here at Lighthouse TV. Know that we're equipping you to love the Lord with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. From America's first capital, Philadelphia, I'm Joe Watkins. Thanks so much for watching. God willing, I'll see you next week. What an amazing life.
Yeah.
The way God is able to use people.
It wasn't a straight line.
No, not a straight line. And you can take somebody from the most difficult, challenging circumstances, and then God is able to work wonders.
Yeah. I bet his SAT scores were still higher than mine. Joe Watkins' State of Independence is a production of Lighthouse TV, positively different. Made possible in part because of the support of viewers like you.